I know two of them. Are
But like
gonna
5 months, so I'm still kind of
And
like.
then Wes run for mayor. So that could be an empty position.
So believe it or not, I was working more in like development, or sustainability studies, that kind of thing. I worked back in Minneapolis, so I was with like a real estate.
Half a new board.
They needed something to do
Come
kind
in.
of more market research, more like demographic analysis, that kind of thing. So probably the field.
So somebody,
Did I hear you were in Atlanta for a while?
he goes, thank God you're still there. He's like, because everybody else seems to be leaving. I said, I'll be here for long. Trust me.
He'll be here.
Like Springfield area.
Well,
Yeah.
I worked in the music business.
I
Right. Starting.
did this for the first time recently. I haven't seen it.
We can leave.
Oh, I have like a name tag I put on.
That was like my first real.
You're talking about a seat. You don't know, they didn't give me one.
Here for a minute. I didn't have a until I came here.
Right, it's just like double, right? It's, yeah, but it's a nice city, but yeah, you're right, the traffic. Anyway, nice to meet you.
He's, well, you only have to work till you're, 25
More
years.
than-
I was like, yeah, but I still haven't worked because I'm. Yeah, well, my dad's 79, still about 7 days every 2 weeks. He's a pharmacist for Sam's. So he still works every 2 weeks, 7 days. And so I don't see, and my mom still works, she's 75. She works 4 days a week too, like for about 4 hours. So,
What if I wanted to bring a retired out of Chicago? I was like, all right, just lineman, I get to be done. 2 weeks later, he went and started working at a clerk ship. Has left there 3 times. And came back the next week. And I think having to work, then having to do something.
Let's switch seats.
I can move down. If you need someone to, okay.
I'm going to move here to Michael.
I can scoot down. if you need.
No,
Okay.
you're perfect. That's your spot. You're here. You were here first. You get
But if
the,
somebody else needs.
there's a chair there. We're good.
Yeah.
I know. I.
Thank you.
I know, I was like, I haven't seen
Audible. I was like, can someone sit down
Lexus
with me?
factory.
I was trying to hide in the back.
She's nice, but she retired.
So, okay, that's
Yeah,
a,
the other side's a little bigger font.
okay,
This,
because
this, just so I don't forget who I
Not
am.
doing anything
Yeah.
right now. They're.
good.
Her husband works.
I
there
got
too.
this for you when we get kicked off after Josh does his introduction.
Are you back for good or?
I should be 49 and retired.
Like I said, he's gonna be here in a minute. He'll do a quick introduction. And obviously you'll kick the meeting off and then.
Right, but I don't think it's gonna happen. It's strange.
I've been retired for like a year.
Apologize.
National bank.
Okay.
I tried to just kind of step back from.
I didn't have a mortgage, all that stuff. Thousands.
Yeah.
Healthcare, all that stuff.
You can slip up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just, my wife's, her second is due and.
Yeah.
I go, wow. Yeah, I think I go here the best I can, and also at home, so. Busy, just got meetings this morning.
So,
So I worked for 2 country artists, and so we didn't have like a retirement plan. So when I started here, they're like, do you have retirement that you want to roll over? And I was like,
It doesn't have to be all of them.
just push it a little bit.
Gotta push all of them a little bit. That's
oblivious to what retirement even was before I started working with the city. I worked for
Yeah.
years.
Did a lot of like mixed use work and stuff, so that was pretty cool. Yeah.
I worked for
We're like a real estate consulting firm, so they hire us out to do like market feasibility study, work for safety
So we did everything for road, personal.
study, right? So
Every-
yeah, it's good. And we started traveling with our family. Yeah, well, I'm like, so I've done it already. I've done some transportation and planning work, so it's not like I did master planning, so they
Florida.
advise well.
Bill.
Yeah, it was kind of a nice way to spread a while back.
I'll be there. I can't get him to commit one way or another. He said no. He asked when I said,
mean, transit rates for development, right? So. College and
They never allowed it. They forced them like that, you know, get this, a lot of their families.
You know, still learning. I mean, we have our challenges with traffic here, but yeah. So I think
Kids, better pay.
Sucked in.
You planted trees.
I came in on that. You know, just hit.
don't know yet. You've got like.
Our sunshine coordinating,
Though too, it's like.
and we were looking at the next month or so, and it's gonna start off like, you know, about when they might want to, it needs to be before, but the
It's how, like, if you know Charlotte.
I was like, moving the computers around. So
I'll
You around. I'll shoot you an email with some options and take you. Like the stuff you're sharing, ready to put there. That kind of level.
like the stuff.
Yeah, like, we're gonna want to see the same plan, but we're not gonna show one thing we want and not the other, so. Like, so Dylan had a house.
And this falls on that stuff too, but that stuff could change.
No, I have most of my.
You know, you're cooking.
So.
Got time to do this today,
Just got, let's proceed with this sign. So.
and there just may not be this urgency to get it done before the 15th. Like, well, our office.
I think. I'm not. But I don't.
Billion.
It does get the burn. It's still a thing.
They have the bypass going.
They're like politicians. They do like.
What is that probably like?
We do.
Away from that one.
They do a good job of just getting it.
And bypass all the way, that's a long. Like we can only do so many of these huge ones.
Scenario, we can, I think if we did it in March, still get
That's when I recognize, cause like, you know, in a big company like Patriot, that's it's like short-term.
Oh, I'm saying it should.
Oh,
that's the main.
That is a.
as far as I know, we're expecting the EA to be completed and submitted end of January. So I'll need to check with Mark to make sure.
I might just want to see it.
And they still, they still, are they moved?
I think, I can ask Sean, but, so I think that's fine.
How long is this? Not thousand.
That being sent out for like some,
What?
document before.
Yeah, it's like-
My way to like their concurrence.
It's like, what, 80,000, 90,000, back then, so you got to put, you know, getting like. It's really, like, I don't know what to tell you. Here it is, that social doing things. You know,
This process, it does go straight to.
We got a lot of stakeholders for like a concurrence point on the document. So
It's not actually part of.
Yeah.
Say it's one of the essence. It's the engagement. Company got closer to the estimates than where it's like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we had no, it's crap shit.
Where's the second?
Stuff, this is gonna be great.
Yeah, he was really good with us. He's just like, really, he's a jerk. Like, he's.
Everybody, thanks for coming. I don't know if I'm gonna gavel us in today since this is just a study session, but I appreciate y'all coming to talk about the choice lane public-private partnership concept with the folks from TDOT. I think Michael wants to say a little bit. We've got some folks from TDOT here that are going to speak to us today. Michael?
thank you, Josh. Good morning, everyone. Looking forward to the work session with TDOT here in a bit, but I just wanted to say a few things from staff's perspective so we can turn it over to them and let them wrap up our time together with a conversation about the P3 authority. A couple of things to share with you. I think I made the announcement at your last meeting, but Daniel McDonald is officially with GNRC now. He's our new Director of Transportation and Infrastructure. Also has been recently confirmed essentially as our NPO coordinator. So we'll be the primary point of contact for TDOT, Federal Highway and Federal Transit, all things related to the Nashville area NPO. This is his first week, so he's getting on board with all our HR systems and kind of learning about the things that will be immediately in front of him over the next couple of weeks. So I wanted to just make that introduction. Looking forward to having him on staff. We also have a couple of vacant positions that we're trying to fill relatively soon. We've got a complete streets engineer position that we're looking to add, and a couple of planning positions that we're looking to add to kind of bolster our staffing as we get deep into the update to the regional transportation plan that we'll be working on with you all throughout 2025. I also wanted to let you all know, I think most of you either were in attendance or maybe participated online at the Transportation Policy Board meeting last month, where we presented the first look at our 2050 outlook, population, employment, land development forecasts, and the initial traffic forecasts from that growth and development out to the year 2050. It's our initial output. What we're going to be asking you to do through an email follow-up after today's meeting is to help us review that ground truth, the model's predictions, particularly for the short term. And then like you did last time, the last cycle where we updated the model, look for your input on any permitted, like any development that's under construction now or permitted and expected to be built by the year 2030. So if we can get that included in our forecast without hoping the model predicts that accurately. And then we'll reset the control totals and then forecast beyond the 2030 horizon once we've incorporated your feedback. We'll need that feedback fairly quickly, probably over about a 3 to 4 week period. I know Max works with you all on a pretty regular basis on this topic, but that'll be something that we'll ask for your direct input on as we look to finalize those forecasts in very early 2025. I think that is all I have this morning. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the welcome. I'll turn it over to Rebecca Hammonds to get us into the work session.
Thank you so much. So just a brief introduction. I know I've been here a couple of times, but just want to make sure if there was anyone who wasn't here or that you don't know me. My name is Rebecca Hammonds. I'm the TDOT P3 Communications Officer, which means that I am the sole communications officer / spokesperson, if you will, for our public-private partnership program. I did bring a friend with me. He is my phone a friend, or like, what is it in that game? You like ask the audience. So Tom's here with me. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Tom Hutchinson. I'm on the technical team that's supporting TDOT in the development of the I-24 Southeast Choice Lanes. I serve as the project director for that team.
So some of you have heard me say this before, but I am a communications specialist that's posing as an engineer. So give me some grace here. I got my start in local news as a reporter and multimedia journalist, and I've made a very harsh right turn into transportation. So, but we're really excited to do this today. And I want to start by saying this is hopefully just, it is a workshop. You know, I do have a presentation with slides, but I really want to hear from you all. We want to answer your questions. We want to create discussion and bridge any knowledge gaps that may be here. You know, what I don't always know is how much you know. And so we want to bring this information to the table, but also create a lot of discussion so that we can understand where your knowledge may be and where we can help. We want to start. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have the clicker? Thank you. That way I can advance. This is just a look at where we're going to be today. So we'll do overview, some things you probably already know and have already seen, but we'll breeze right through that. And then we'll get into that P3 delivery method, the P3 process, and then we'll focus and hone in on the project itself. So as background, you know, how did we get here? The Transportation Modernization Act was passed last spring. It did several things, but here's the top 3. It authorized P3s for TDOT. Oh, good morning. And you all know, I know our other friend, Matt. So we could not enter into these specific deals or contracts before the TMA was passed. It also gave us more authority, and that it expanded the number of alternative delivery projects that we could deliver. Beforehand, we could only deliver a certain number of alternative delivery projects within a certain time frame. So this gave us, I think, unlimited number. And I'm sure you all know, but when it comes to alternative delivery methods, we're able to expedite the delivery of those projects in a much more cost-efficient way. You can see there 70% faster and $22 million in cost savings, which from a state perspective is huge. And then it brought us EV parity. You know, I know that you guys have heard, but the funding that we receive is through the gas tax. And with more EV vehicles on the road, we have to make sure to bring that parity along into this new, generation of vehicles and driving and the way that we all get from point A to point B. The 3.3 billion was 300 million set aside for counties, and then the 10-year plan was also looped into that. So we are looking at a $15 billion contribution for the next decade, which is substantial. With P3s, you guys have probably seen this, but the private sector partner enters into a long-term contract with the public sector, and they will do all of those things. They will design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the facility. This allows us to have a project where maybe there otherwise would not be one. Something that we continue to communicate is that this is a 1 or a 0 scenario. Under the current funding paradigm we're facing, we would not be able to bring these mega projects or large scale projects to Tennesseans simply because the money's not there. There's another graphic that we show, and it's the $1.2 billion annual work program that TDOT has. And then, something like Choice Lanes from Nashville to Murfreesboro is an estimated $5 billion project. So I don't know about you, but I don't want our entire work program for a year to be devoted to one corridor. It's just not something that's feasible. With a P3, we can devote state funds where they need to go, which is across the state. And that peanut butter doesn't have to go quite so thin. The TMA also gave us our 10-year plan, or was part of that discussion. We decided that what we've been doing for so long hasn't quite been working, and what we start will now get finished. The average of 15 years to deliver one project, like I said, wasn't quite working. So we've committed to work under a fiscally constrained 10-year project plan, which keeps us accountable to, like I said, finish what we start. So just some overall goals of the Choice Lanes network. I mean, they're straightforward. We've talked about them before, but we want to make sure that we support the massive growth that's here in Nashville. We want to expedite that project delivery timeline. We want to minimize what we contribute as far as funding. And then we're with, engaging the private sector partner under all of that is we want to develop those strong relationships with the committed industry partners, not just the new ones that we're cultivating, but making sure to continue to develop the relationships that we have with our local industry partners. We've got some great contractors and consultant groups that we work with. And through this process, we're bolstering that relationship because we know they'll also be brought on board. So again, a review, these choice lanes, when we talk about the Choice Lanes program, specifically, this is a user fee facility that's price managed and will be designed, built, financed, operated, and maintained by that private sector partner. In regards to the 24 corridor, it is 2 additional lanes of travel in both directions. A nuance here that I think gets lost sometimes, the Transportation Modernization Act was very specific in its language. The state cannot take a current lane and convert it into a user fee facility. If we are going to implement a user fee facility, it has to be an additional lane of travel. There is no conversion that can happen. And that was really important to the commissioner and to the governor in their discussions of all of this, was to say, we're not going to be taking anything away from people that they then have to pay for. This will be additional lanes, additional capacity that will then be managed actively with a user fee. We've all seen these photos, but choice lanes in Virginia, that's what we're talking about here in our area. 2 additional lanes separated by the buffer and flexible delineators. Project benefits, we know, and what we have seen across the country is that trip times become much more reliable. And for general purpose traffic, or, those who are in the free general purpose lanes, you will see less congestion. Other states have seen something roughly to 15 to 20% reduction in congestion in those lanes. With a user fee, I'm not going to belabor this point. I think we all have heard about this or talked about this, but that fee that the driver, a user would pay will change based on demand. I think sometimes what gets lost here is that we want to make sure there's not operational failure. There are lanes and express lanes in other states that reach capacity, and then people pay, I don't know, $10, $15 to sit in traffic and not really go any faster than the other lanes. That's what we don't want to happen. And that's why implementing a variable or a dynamic pricing model is critical to making sure that they work. I've been saying lately, because I've been at a lot of stakeholder and community events. I'm a young mom, and my worst case scenario is paying the user fee during a high price time, because I'm going to need that fee I'm going to need that choice lane during rush hour to get my little guy from daycare. But my worst case scenario is paying the fee only to then be late to daycare and pay the daycare late fee that I was working to avoid because the lanes didn't work. So I don't want that for other mothers. I don't want that for other people. I don't want it for anyone who's trying to get to an appointment or anything like that. So, I think a lot of times people are so concerned about that high price, and as they should be. We have to be cognizant of what we're asking people to pay or what they would be willing to pay. But we also have to ensure that these lanes function. Incident response, we are consistently engaging with first responders, but also working currently now on some plans and strategies on rollout. So you can see there, we will make sure that they have access, that they have been trained, that they understand where their access points are, but that we will make sure to engage with them early and often on how they best can respond to incidents inside and out of the choice lanes. Transit, just a reminder, WeGo buses will ride or operate for free in these lanes. This is success that we've seen in other states. Our favorite is that one in the middle with FDOT, 68% reduction in travel times, and they saw ridership quadruple in the first 5 years. This could be a really huge thing for WeGo and for MTA here in Nashville, and not just Nashville, but the region. So we hope that with this operational advantage, transit will be a reality for more people. Right now, maybe it's not a reality because it's not reliable, or because they don't have a route near them, or because it doesn't, go by their work, whatever it may be. This may make it more reliable or more realistic for them. And you can see there just a lot of the different benefits when it comes to transit. And overall, the trickle down effect is if we can get more people off the road and into a transit bus, hopefully less congestion. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. A high overview. That was kind of like a recap. Here's where we've been. Here's what you've heard before. What questions, or do you have any questions for just the basics of how we got here and what we're talking about?
General question on, I think maybe in the 5th slide where it showed I-65 as part of a study area. What's the criteria? Is it the higher traffic count, higher demand in the southeastern area? And is there a tier that the northern part of the I-65 corridor would get looked at?
So when we were developing the TMA and then continued on through developing or identifying the corridors that would be possible, 3 corridors stuck out as far as the traffic studies, what showed us. The 24 corridor here in Nashville, the 40-75 split in Knoxville, and then, help me, is it 24 in Chattanooga? Is that Moccasin Bend?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, John. So those 3 corridors are what we see as like the biggest pain points throughout the state. They see the highest congestion, they see the highest issues as far as traffic volume. Really 24 here and 40 and 75 in Knoxville are like neck and neck. I think if you were to split hairs, you would say that 40 and 75 have the highest actual volume, like traffic volume count. And then here in Nashville, we see the highest congestion. There's some kind of technicality there. I can't remember, but with I guess the criteria, it is about congestion. So we did look at other areas here in Nashville, but it's more so of like, where do we see the worst pain point?
You said 24 in Chattanooga?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And those traffic studies are on our website. So you can find all that data where we looked at even freight and logistics, what kind of volume they bring in, passenger vehicle volume, all of that is on our website. I can get that to you guys, but.
I think this makes more sense now. I've heard this for the last 2 years, and it was concept. And of course, I think the natural human emotion or thought is like, yeah, right, how's this going to work? But kind of seeing and hearing the intention that you're putting behind this presentation, and I can explain it to my wife now.
Oh, good. Oh my gosh, that means I've done my job.
That's just me.
Thank you for saying that because, we get feedback and as you can imagine, sometimes it's not great. So I appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm not sure this is a basic how we got here question. So if it's not, it needs to be addressed later, let me know. But
Okay.
so the public-private partnership, presume that you guys have enough work into this to know that there are private companies out there that are going to want to invest in this. And presume they would want to invest in this because it's going to be profitable for them. I saw in one of the slides, it says that the private entity that does this will be the ones setting the user fees for the project. How much of a percentage of the user fees do they get? And are there caps on the user fees?
That's a great question. We will dive into it.
Okay.
That there's a lot of information. So with that, I'm gonna transition into the P3 delivery method and what that looks like as far as the structure and how we do that. In short, I will address black and white. The developer or the concessionaire will be adjusting and changing that price. However, they will only be able to do that within the parameters that our Transportation Modernization Board and TDOT set. So there are various ways that we can structure those parameters. There can be a hard cap, a soft cap, a limit, and then there can be fees that fall within, and then speed or time or how many vehicles, right? So there's so many ways that we can measure that. But our goal is to maximize throughput while also making sure that they're still functioning. And that has to do with the revenue side of it. That has to do with the fee side of it. So, we want to make sure that we're setting that methodology in a way that they can still do their job to make sure that the lanes still flow, but also we're still getting a good amount of throughput in the lanes because, you all know, like, it's a parking lot out there sometimes. And so we want to make sure that enough people can utilize them to get that 15 to 20% out of the other lanes. So we will get there. Continue to remind me though, if there's parts of that we need to circle back to, let me know. Yeah. Okay.
Before you get into project specific stuff. So TDOT has identified these 3 corridors through the 10-year plan, but the TMA board ultimately has to decide to advance these. I know they've acted on 24. So the other 2 are still a little more up in the air, dependent on the TMA board.
I would say. Yeah. So we identified the corridors to say that we want this to be a program, not a project. You've heard us say that. But at this point, we're still, I think, neck deep in this. And then we'll be able to transition our focus elsewhere once we get maybe a little further along. I can't speak to planning. I saw you pull up. Can you speak to any of that as far as where we are in long-range planning when it comes to other P3s?
Well, the 4075 is going, as you know, Sean, is under a study right now to look at things more than just the choice lanes. It's looking at a potential bypass that used to be called the orange route for a long time. So and there's a part of that study is also to look at relocating the way station in that area to try to help with the congestion in that. So the choice lane opportunity is all within that study, as opposed to this one being just, the study on I-24. And as far as Chattanooga, nothing has been done on Chattanooga yet.
And then, this is not addressing your specific question for those studies, but we do currently, and you know this, we do currently have what's called a PEL. It's a planning and environmental linkages study. That is happening concurrently, essentially, so that it can inform us here in the Nashville regional area on how to best handle or what projects should come next regarding the downtown loop. So that PEL study footprint, it covers pretty much the whole downtown loop. And that way it is kind of like the foundational study to then say, how can we peel off some projects from this environmental study and maybe, maybe we can have something that connects to a choice lane, or maybe a choice lane can then connect to another facility. But it's really we know that we're going to need to do more work in the loop. So that's kind of like another foundational piece to all of this. Anything else? Okay, moving on. So public-private partnerships. They are not just toll roads. They are not just toll lanes. They can apply to a very large range of asset classes. You've heard us say they harness the private sector experience and innovation to deliver infrastructure. And the extent of that private participation can be tailored to the needs of the project. So they don't all look this way. They're not all DBFOM, and we'll talk about that, but they don't all design, build, finance, operate, maintain. There are plenty of other asset classes that they apply to and other payment methods, and we'll get into that a little bit. So this is the why and the when. A P3 delivery approach typically includes a combination of those things, that number one. So what we're talking about here is that private sector will design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the infrastructure asset. And I'll just get a pause there. You all are planners. I mean, you probably understand when we say all those words, that is a lot. That is the state handing over a significant amount of risk to the private sector. But in return for that risk, and what we'll talk about here in a little bit, is the revenue piece. What we will be implementing is a P3 in the revenue risk model. So with all of that risk, they need to see some kind of return. And that's the revenue piece that we're talking about. They also typically include these long-term contracts with the high degree of price certainty. They want to know that if they're going to take all of that risk, if they're going to enter into a deal for 50 years, that there's a high degree of certainty they'll make back their money. The allocation of risk to the party best able to manage that risk. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Alignment of payment with the performance, and then of course the performance defined by output, not input. These are just some of the common categories that you'll see P3s used for. What we have seen in Tennessee is a variety of these things, but some of the larger ones that you may know about are local universities use these P3 deals to create dorms and housing and large facilities. So I know MTSU has used it. I know UT Knoxville. You can see there street lighting, public schools, utilities, a lot of different various projects. which shows us that when it comes to a P3, yes, this is the private sector, but like the public sector is gaining a really high value from what they're getting. These are publicly used, facilities that are making large impacts for their state, their community, their university, whatever it may be. Okay, so this is where we're going to dig in a little bit. This is a comparison of delivery models. To look at the red box in the bottom, that's your P3 model. The 2 boxes on top, those are your more traditional models. What's not listed here is what the TMA allowed us to do, which was those more, the more options of alternative delivery. So progressive design build and CMGC, those are not listed here, but they are very similar in the design build world. The P3 model, what we're looking at here for a revenue risk model is it's down at the bottom. You've got your design, build, finance, operate, maintain, revenue risk. And you can see all of the risk transfers are toggled on or colored, bubbled in. And even more so to zoom in on demand, this is really one of the only, if not the only, models that is contingent or dependent on demand. And that's something that's totally new for Tennessee as well. All of the deal, the structure of the deal, the way we share risk, that is, there are levers that we can raise and lower and adjust that will have a major impact on the contract itself and on the deal itself. I'm going to stop here, and we've kind of gone over a few things. I'm going to ask for any questions.
So the finance portion of this is like for the design build finance. So the private entity is responsible for financing the entirety of the project?
Entirety might be strong, but yes. So we have a graphic here that kind of shows and explains it, but they're essentially bringing equity and debt to the table. We also engage with the federal government for TIFIA loans and some bonding.
Yeah, private activity bonds are also leveraged from time to time.
Any others?
Becca, when I hear higher risk for private sector, does that generally mean more expensive of a project?
It can, but it also doesn't. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, I don't think it's
I'm gonna be straight on, yeah.
it's comparable in that sense. Yeah. Interesting question.
It's the working with the public on mitigating that risk. Like there's a risk share mechanism, is the state going to take on right-of-way risk, for example? Is the state going to take on the right-of-way risk so that the concessionaire doesn't have to, so they don't inflate their cost?
And forgive me, I did not make this introduction. John Davis is our project manager.
So yeah, with right-of-way, a good example is the state going to take on the right-of-way risk so that the concessionaire doesn't have to put a large fictitious number in his quote for right-of-way or utilities.
One of the lessons that we have learned from other states is the risk sharing element to the contract. When the state takes on more of that risk, whether it be utilities, right of way, the deal is changed. The contract has changed. So there might be less of a concession payment versus more of a concession payment, or a concession payment at all may not happen. So it all kind of, like I was saying, those levers that you can move. The same as with your user fee structure and methodology. So we may talk a little bit more about that here in a few, but let's say we were to implement some kind of structure that limits them on how high they can put that fee. They would then say, okay, well, if you're going to implement that, that means that we need to make sure we're not taking more risk somewhere else, because that's a risk to us. We may not be able to, garner all the revenue that we think that this corridor could generate. So it's all about making sure that we're protecting, the public's interests while also making sure that we're finding a way to get the best deal for the state at the same time.
I think the cost is more directly linked to the scope that you're biting off. You know, are you looking to construct 26 miles, 13 miles? What, you know, in a highly constrained area where there's expensive right of way, that dictates more kind of
cost.
the relationship between the cost.
I've got I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but I was interested in the construction methodology to accelerate the delivery of this project.
Okay.
Because typically, like for instance, we've got a state route project taking 3 years to do a mile. How will that methodology occur and how can that accelerate that delivery?
So I can't speak directly to how this works in a P3. You might be able to fill in some gaps. I know that when it comes to something like a CMGC, we saw that on the Broadway Bridge here in Nashville. So what happens is we bring the contractor in very, very early in the phase. So they were demolishing the old bridge while we were finalizing the new design. So work is happening simultaneously while other things are, you know, coming in behind it. So in the expediting of a project, something like progressive design build, CMGC, I mean, we're able to bring those consultants and contractors to the table so much earlier, and the work is happening so much quicker because of that. With a P3, it's a
Yeah, I mean, they're highly incentivized to get open to traffic, to cut that ribbon as soon as possible. Because then they can begin generating demand for the facility, generating user fee revenue for the facility. In the contract itself, we can provide both incentives to accelerate and disincentives for them being late that are financially based that can help drive that outcome, that accelerated outcome. But in this particular case, for this type of project, the incentive is already baked in that the faster you open this up to traffic, the faster you're earning.
They're making that
user
revenue.
fee revenue.
So is it 24/7, 7 days a week?
No, they will be working on a larger schedule than our state workers or state contractors ever could. But we are also going to make sure that in the contract, they understand that they have to adhere to some of the same construction policies that we set. So no, they're not going to be working during like CMA Fest or, you know, we're not, but yes, there will be some modifications so that they can get the work done. Others.
It's anticipated this will be the fastest, largest project you have ever seen in the state of Tennessee. We're anticipating possibly 5-year construction. So for 20-something miles and done in 5 years is unheard of. But these companies, this is what they do, and this is their bread and butter. So like Tom alluded to, their incentives, you know, their hope is to get this road open to get traffic so they can start generating revenue to pay back all that equity that they took out loans for.
So with that, just continuing the overview of P3s, this is a look at what we have seen across the country. These are the projects that we're learning from. You can see in Texas, they've done this revenue risk model and that alone. We're, like I mentioned, we're making sure to learn the good and the bad lessons. There have been some facilities that are learning lessons as far as political lessons, optics, public pushback, the actual mechanics of the facilities not working, maintenance. So we are talking to peer states and making sure that this is something that we avoid or learn from. So this is what I was mentioning earlier about how, like, the structure of what we're looking at. So you can see in red, we have TDOT. And then you've got the users of the facility. So you've got the drivers of 24 next to us. Right underneath us in the middle is what we have titled here as the P3 project company for choice lanes. In the industry, that's called an SPV, a special project vehicle or special project company. In this specific instance, it'll be called something like I-24 Southeast Choice Lanes LLC or something. It will be a specific company made just for this project. It will be made up of those branches you see extended from it. So on the left, you've got your designer, your construction contractor. Underneath it, there's the operations and maintenance. To the right, you've got equity and debt. What is not shown here, and what I should have like grabbed a new slide for, is what should be here also is a dotted line or a hard line from TDOT off to the side with a label of commercial back office and user fee back office. Most of the time, concessionaires or developers will put the commercial back office, user fee back office. When I say that, I mean the entity that is processing the fees and looking at the LPRs and sending the bill through the mail, or, managing the account by which you put your money into, and then whenever you take the trip, the money will come out of that account and you'll pay for your session that month. So with them, they often are baked into the deal where they're part of that SPV. TDOT has decided not to do that. We want to make sure that we have oversight over what user fees are processed and when and how it's done and who's a habitual violator and all of the above. So that is something we will procure separately, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is just a look at the structure. Off to the right, the equity investor and debt lender. So just a little bit more about the financing that you were asking about. So it's really like a question of where does this money come from? This is not every time, but roughly majority of the time you're looking at about a third equity with 2/3 of that being debt. And there's also a possibility of some kind of public contribution or cash that comes into the deal if it's necessary, which it is not always necessary. So I hope that helps answer that a little bit. If you have any additional questions, we could talk about it, but. This is more of the why and when would you need a P3. So public sector needs and drivers, I mean, it's all the things we've seen before, right? Aging infrastructure, evolving service and expectations, construction costs, budgetary constraints, all of the things we're talking about here in Tennessee. And then, cost overruns and delays. Well, a lot of times we can be left holding the bag, and sometimes and things like that. That risk is transferred when we talk about P3. So meeting the need with P3s, you've got the motivation, like we talked about, and the accelerated delivery. This is a big risk for them, so they're going to make sure that they deliver it and start to make their money back. Output and income driven, the value for money demonstrates the savings and costs, time and risk. So that's something we haven't talked about yet, but with every P3, whether it be for another asset class or a revenue risk model, a value for money is required. And what it does is it essentially just proves, okay, when you run your numbers, does this actually warrant a P3? Would it actually be cost saving, or would there be cost savings when we talk about transferring all that risk? If not, the value's not there. It's not, P3 is not right. There are often times when public sector entities will come to the industry and say, hey, we have this job, we put out an RFQ, we want you guys to participate in it. And sometimes they'll respond and say, P3 doesn't seem like the right case here. So they have to show, the public entities have to show that there really is value there and that a P3 is the right choice. And then you've got your private sector competition. With competition, you can produce a really high quality product. And so right now we have several teams that are interested in this corridor and in this facility, which is a really exciting thing, because what would be worse than putting this big project out and then no one caring, no one wanting to do the job. So it's exciting. It's good news, but that means that, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. So next then is just, it's the benefits and challenges then once you do identify your project as needing a P3. The benefits we've talked about, you can control over cost, schedule, performance. You've got a single point of responsibility. It's that SPV we talked about. You're designed to optimize for vehicle access and operations. You've got that effective risk transfer. And you have access to financing, something that TDOT has not been able to do. So it is a really exciting time that we're getting something that we would not be able to otherwise deliver. But there are always challenges. So these come with more complex and expensive procurement processes with, of course, the TOMs of the world, the specialized advisors that we need on our team so that when hey, we've never done this before, how does this work? Or, hey, legal team, please don't let us fall into an issue that we should have known otherwise. We have less direct control. We are the public owner, but that means that we're not calling up every individual sub or contractor, right? So we do have the go-between that we will need to deal with. Public acceptance. So, I mean, that's why I'm here. Not that you guys don't accept this, but the public optics and the political atmosphere is a huge part of P3s, because why would this private entity come in only to be derailed by something like public backlash? It is a huge factor. So that can be a challenge sometimes. Education, just sheer lack of knowledge of something like financing that goes into all of this. I don't expect anybody out in the public to really know what would go into this kind of transportation project either. So a lot of education has to be done. And the same goes with that last bullet point. It's really about education, and that includes our local contracting network. We are continuing to educate them just like we are educating anybody else, because this is brand new to Tennessee. So just continuing to talk with them, work through, concepts and what this would mean for them. So let's just go over some maybe myths of what this is and is not. It is a very long-term contract with a private partner. This project will likely be a 50-year contract. They range from 35 to 50, majority of the time. It is, or the public sponsor always owns the asset, so we're not giving away our land to anyone. It does involve private capital. There are shared risks and responsibilities, and there is greater upfront effort to structure and procure this long-term deal. But it is not. It is not free money. It's a really nice thought. It's really easy to say that, well, if we get this deal right, if we move all those levers perfectly, that we're going to get this project for free. And that's not the case. In some cases, there is a public contribution, but also, some of this comes at a cost. Set it and forget it model. That's not what this is either. It uses standard, or that it does not use standard government contracts and technical provisions. It is not incompatible with labor agreements, which doesn't apply here, but in other states, it does become a talking point. And it does not exclude local contractors or DBE and BE firms. And that's that conversation with those local contractors that I just referenced. We're making sure they understand that, yes, this developer will bring arms to bear to get this project done, but they will do it through contracting with their local people. They can't just, our director likes to say this, so it's kind of cheesy, but they can't just helicopter people in all the time. They've got to use the resources that are here. So there will be a significant amount of resources locally that will be used for this project. We've gone over a few things, so I'm going to pause. Any questions, concerns, comments, discussion?
When the contract expires in 35 to 50 years, does TDOT then take over operation maintenance and collect the user fees?
Yeah. So these facilities are so new in the US that I think there's only been one in the US that's gone to handback. Is that correct?
Might be.
I think there's maybe one or two.
Yeah.
So we will set up something in the contract called a handback. It will come back to the state. Now that'll be our children and grandchildren. But we want to make sure that that contract is very specific on, you will hand it back to us in this condition. You will hand it back to us this way. We will have this kind of like authority in this process. So we will be very prescriptive as how that will happen. What else? Okay. Keep going. So these are just some points of, here's what it looks like to have a successful P3. We've got to establish clear legal authority, which is why we make sure that we have some really great advisors in the room. We have to evaluate the delivery options and build a business case for this. Again, that value for money, we've got to make sure that there is a real case for a P3. It can't just be, oh, we just want a P3. No, does it warrant a public-private partnership? And we also have to invest in communications and stakeholder outreach. That is a huge factor in whether or not it's successful in the long run. We have to engage with industry. So we have had a large event to garner industry input and education and outreach, but we've also been talking with them pretty regularly along the way. And as we've done that, we put the RFQ out last month. We now are in a cone of silence, so we won't be really engaging with them at this point, but engaging with them early helped them understand what we were hoping for, what we expected, what would be realistic for them, and if they should even participate in this procurement process. So we're gonna, I should have paused now. We're gonna actually talk about the project itself. So we'll get into some more details about 24 Southeast. I do want a disclaimer. This is some information that we have not really taken publicly. So if we could just use some discretion in sharing with folks, it's fine if it gets out. I would, trust me, communications, I wouldn't have done it if I had known it possibly go out. But we did want to make sure that you all could see, you know, some things before maybe your constituents or maybe the folks who you're dealing with every day. Any other questions though about the actual contracting method and what a P3 looks like before we move on?
Is that selection subject to like TMA board decision oversight? Do they have to bless it or anything, or?
Orders of the projects?
Oh, the selection of the
The selection of the bid,
yeah.
the winner. I don't think so.
No.
No. Your question earlier about, I didn't answer it, but yes, the TMA board has to vote to approve what projects are user-fee facilities. So like if we did have choice lanes in Chattanooga, we would take that to them and say, we've identified this. Do you approve of us moving forward? They would say yes or no. But no, they don't really have a say, not a say. They don't have any kind of participation in that bid process.
You explain just quickly, and maybe you're covering it later, the RFQ, when those are due, shortlisting, RFP.
Yeah, well, so I mean, why don't you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So as Rebecca stated, we've had 5 teams so far from day one, since we wanted to do this P3, put interest out there. There's been 5 teams all along that's been on board with us. We've had the individual one-on-one meetings up until the RFQ. There was a 6th team that came on late, like literally within 2 weeks of the RFQ being announced, addressed interest. We actually had their one-on-one meeting the day before our RFQ was published to get them in there so we could talk to them. So we did issue an RFQ. All that information is public at this point. It is out there. You all can go look at that request for qualifications. Those teams are to submit that questionnaire, their paperwork back to us by the end of January. We will then go into a evaluation period with all those teams. I think we're allowing 2 months, Tom, is that right? Thereabouts, 8 to 10 weeks to do evaluations. Those will be scored. There is a scoring process for that. Our hope and goal is to narrow that down to 3 teams minimum. Again, could be more, but we want to have a minimum of 3 teams to issue RFPs to. Once we do issue the RFP information, and all that will be made public, who we shortlist, all that will be available. Once we go to the RFP phase, we'll introduce more RID documents to those teams, geotechnical information, traffic count information, all that kind of stuff. And then that will go into RFP. Rebecca, help me.
We've got a timeline I can pull up.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
But when that RFP comes, it'll go through the same scoring process. Then we will have a selection. We'll have to go to the board, I'm assuming, to them to bless that award.
No, that's
No?
what we were just
Okay.
saying. They don't have involvement.
So we don't, but anyway, once we get there and we finally come to an agreement, we'll have what we call commercial close. Once we have commercial close, then there's the financing part of that usually takes 9 to 10 months after that. Then we'll have financial close. But once the commercial close ends, we can actually start some of the right-of-way agreements. That early work can be going on while this finance part of it wraps up. But then there'll be a financial close. Once financial close is wrapped up, we can actually put shovels in the ground and start construction. So that's kind of have a time frame how
Thank you.
all that works.
Yeah, that's right. Any questions about that? So to jump into I-24, we have multiple goals for the Choice Lanes program overall, but these are just some drivers for this Southeast project. One being, building a network, having the Pell be separate but informative. We want to make sure that the Pell is something that is a standalone environmental study project that will help us inform and be a foundational item for multiple projects throughout the downtown loop, but it can be instrumental, and we know it will be instrumental as far as the Choice Lanes program goes. Goal number 2, we want to foster competition. So that goal number 2 saying, receiving multiple fixed price bids for the project specifically, achieving commercial close by 26, as he mentioned. And then lastly, we understand that public funds might be necessary, but we want to minimize our input or our contribution, I should say.
You said financial close by 26. Is there a first quarter, second quarter?
The commercial close in the 3rd quarter of 2026, and then financial close follows, as John mentioned.
9 to 10 months
Probably
after.
27.
We do have a timeline later on. It shows.
I can jump to it if I need to. Okay, so we're going to look at the project or the corridor in a couple ways. This is the facility as a whole. I will then show you the project, which will be the first project or first piece of it that we expect to be done. And then we will talk about another piece of it that we expect to be completed after that. But the facility as a whole is this 26-mile footprint that is currently being studied. This is our NEPA environmental footprint. It goes from just about 840 to near Fessler's, and then you can see it kind of goes up near the airport, near Briley. The facility will become contracted under a single procurement, but then, as I mentioned, developed in those 2 phases. We are talking about that hard bid for the full facility and project, and then there will be development rights for what we're going to call the southern extension. So it would be kind of like a right of first proposal, essentially. Whoever would win that first project bid, they would have the opportunity to say, okay, well, we're going to want to do the southern extension at X amount of time. This X trigger of traffic or volume is, said that we're ready for that. And if the state doesn't come to an agreement on their proposal, then we would say, okay, thanks anyway. See you later. We're going to go talk to other contractors. This is the project. So this would be that first phase or that first project. It would be 2 new choice lanes, both directions. The southern limit being around Rocky Fork or Enon Springs Road. That northern limit would be the same. You're looking at the Fessler's Lane, Briley area. It's about 18 miles. That estimated cost at this point is roughly 2.7 to 2.9 for that project. This would be the 50-year concession term. The extension would then go, it's that dotted line now at the bottom, from the 840 area up to where we stopped at Rocky Fork, Enon Springs. The developer would be required to submit that mandatory proposal. And those specific triggers will be baked into that language. So we would put in specific milestones to say at this level of congestion, or at this level of growth, or at this level of, traffic data, insert your term there. That would then be triggered to say this now is necessary. We expect you to send your proposal. Any questions over the facility, the project, the extension?
I'm sorry, the construction estimate of 2.5 billion or whatever it was, did that include projected cost of any right of way that's necessary? Do you expect right of way to have to be garnered for the project?
Yeah, there is a footnote on the slide with kind of what scope is included in there.
It includes estimated costs for DNC, right-of-way, utility relocation, and toll.
Well, that's the.
Oh,
that's the
sorry.
industry.
Yes, I gotcha. So it would include the estimation of the tolling roadside systems, CEI, maintenance during construction, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. And back to the question that the gentleman asked previously, I didn't really understand the answer to that. Would the private entity be purchasing the right of way with the funds that they have, and then the right of way is turned over to the state, or the state fund the right of way purchase?
This is one of so in all of these risk sharing mechanisms, the state wanted to plant some flags in the ground early. We have decided as a state agency to acquire that right away up front, to take that risk off of the concessionaire, off of the private entity.
Yeah.
So as it relates to how much public contribution TDOT is willing to put forward to this project, part of that public dollars that we are setting aside for this project is for right-of-way acquisition. So that is part of the public money that's coming from TDOT is for right-of-way acquisition.
Thank you.
That 2.7 to 2.9, was that just the first phase, the estimated cost?
That's the 18 miles, yes.
Do you have any estimated costs in the second phase or not?
I could give you a rough number, but it's going to be so different whenever that proposal would come in.
So if you take the
would
balance
be-
of 5 billion, we're saying for the whole thing, that's the balance. Of
Yeah.
course, it's the easier build section. It'll be the
1.5 to 2.
cheaper build section, if you will.
Thanks.
John, you mentioned that you're setting money aside for right of way. Do you know how much right of way you make?
So early on, we didn't necessarily set that aside. That was set aside in the TMA. It is, it's a total of 250 million that was set aside specifically for this project. And yes, we don't know if we'll need all of it or any of it or what, but that is the number, the public fund number that was set aside.
Are those only state dollars?
That came out of
The
the,
TMA dollar
that came out
from
of
the
the
general
TMA.
fund transfer, the $3 billion general. So that's
Yeah,
not state.
it's not, yeah, that. So it's not state dollars in the sense that taxpayers are contributing toward that. It's from general fund.
Is it possible, when you're thinking about right of way, to think about complementary infrastructure for transit access, like park and rides?
100%. So we haven't, it's not in the plan, right? Like we don't have parking rides or that kind of infrastructure included in a contract, because when you're talking about, okay, well, hey, private developer, we want to add this bridge and this parking ride, and we want to add these lanes elsewhere, it really does start to impact, the facility of, is that now meeting the environmental purpose and need? Or do we have all these, our director calls it barnacles attached onto the deal that's going to have this massive impact? But yes, to answer your question about like keeping those facilities in mind of what are possibilities, we are. And we're also working with Metro to make sure that we're looking at, okay, not just park and ride areas, but how does this connect to Hickory Hollow and what does it look like for the transit center? What does it look like when, will there be a connection from Murfreesboro Road? Like, and what does that look like? So we're all still very early in all this. We have, we're working on a recommended preferred alternative that will go before the public in March, but yes, but not specifically baked into that.
Because Rebecca touched on this, there's, the purpose and need of this statement is to relieve congestion along I-24. It's not to modify a special interchange so this city could have the greatest lanes, while we all would like to achieve that, from a federal standpoint, these guys are in the room, they're asking the questions, well, is that really like Rebecca said, low hanging fruit that adds to the project, or is it really meeting the need and purpose? So there's a good balance game there. But as far as the right of way, we're establishing the footprint of our conceptual design. At the end of the day, they're the designers. The minute we put out RFPs, they're going to be addressing ATCs. It's going to change a lot of that, and we'll have to evaluate that. Is that something we're willing to risk?
I will say, because right of ways kind of become a hot topic here lately, in some communities that we're engaging with. We are working to mitigate the right of way impacts significantly. So when you ask about like, is that being taken into account as far as park and ride locations? Like, yes, we're thinking about planning wise where things could go and like, okay, this allows for a developer to build something out here if they want to, or there's room here if they would think necessary. But the actual right of way footprint that we are working to mitigate, I mean, we are trying to take as little as we can while also delivering a very functional facility.
Understood.
Yeah.
Do projects like these typically factor in opportunities for leveraging transit dollars, for example, like from the FTA, where we can help with building some of those facilities or that infrastructure? What does
I
that
think
look like?
what we've seen in other states is they can. It's not something that we're looking at right now. There are other projects, I can't remember, so forgive me. It may have been Georgia, maybe Virginia. But that they added like multiple lanes of bike ped lanes along with the user fee facility. It's something that we can do, but even in that instance, I don't know if they leveraged Fed dollars, if that's something like
I don't know if FTA money played a role. That was in Virginia.
Virginia. Yeah. Any others? I'll keep on trucking. Okay, so we talked about the facility, the project and extension. Okay, so this is currently what we're looking at as far as access points. I'm trying to think I don't think this is online, but you can see that some of them will be choice lane only. Some of them will be both public and choice lane. And then some of them are new. The key point here is we're not going to be taking anything away. There's no access point that is currently a general purpose access point that we're going to be removing any kind of access to make room for choice lanes. I just want to give you a minute to look because I know there's a lot there. And I think the other note that I want to make very clear here, so P3s are difficult for the public sector to wrap their minds around because we're used to a very structured process of design, bid, build. So when you talk about P3, our team is working very hard to come up with 30% design plans. 30% design plans that will be put in the RFP, and then that private entity will come back to us with, like John mentioned, the rest of the design, and also ATCs, alternative technical concepts, that will adjust probably all, if not most of these access points. So what we are continually reminding people is, while we want to give you a firm design plan and footprint, this is the best we can give you. And it is kind of the skeleton of what we are taking to the industry to say, this is what we expect it to look like. Help us make this work, or tell us how you think it would be better. And they will do that.
A lot of the decisions they're making with access points is financially driven, right? They're trying to generate as much revenue as they can, and we're trying to maximize throughput. So there's, like Rebecca goes back to that, there's a fine line where those two lines cross. And they marry.
You were about to ask a question.
How will the access points work at the interchange? Are these new ramps, new accesses? And then if so, all of these intersections are already congested. So we're adding new access points. How are you going to make, I guess that's during design, but that'd be a concern of making sure that the existing ramps don't queue out to the through lanes for the drivers that aren't using the choice lanes.
Yeah. Quite frankly, that's above my pay grade, is termed in the engineering world. The choice lane only access points are utilizing what's called plaza style interchanges. They actually are ramps that take you up to a stoplight. And then you would go your separate ways. But I hear you. John or Tom, do you have anything to add there?
There's, like you said, there's plaza style interchanges where the ramps will actually come up to the middle of the intersection. There'll be 2 through lanes surrounding the side, so there'll be retaining walls building those ramps up or ramps down. There's all kind, the DDI interchange could work. However, your choice lanes need to be on the outside and not the inside for that to work. So I don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, these intersections already have ramps, right?
Pardon me?
I said these intersections already have ramps for interchanges that are there for the non-choice lanes.
Right. So, Sam Ridley, I think we proposed a plaza style for that interchange because that works. There may not be access at Hickory Hollow because it's an existing DDI. A lot of places are going to be elevated, so they'll have their own. It gets so complicated, and we don't know what we're going to see come down the pike as far as ATCs. Just for a brief example, SR 400 in Atlanta, there were 2 companies that ended up bidding that project. There were 300 something ATCs. I think the department approved 140, 150 something odd of those.
Yeah, it's like 148.
And those are in range from design to pavement sections to, the whole gamut of ATCs. So
We could be making modifications to the existing infrastructure as well for the non-choice lane.
Some of these bridges will need to be reconstructed. Some of the existing bridges will need to be reconstructed as part of this.
because we're widening the footprint of 24. And we all know a lot of the current structures out there are widen those. We're going to have to widen those. I think I saw 64 structure drawings the other day so far on this project.
You mentioned the elevated roadways as a possible.
That's correct.
So do you have I know preliminary, I understand that, but do you have a general idea of what point, I guess, I'm guessing those be closer to town as we expect?
The interchange to interchange, what you're seeing here on this map, the purple dot, the interchange to interchange system access. So there'll be a lot of aerials in the 2440 merge, the 440 merge. The area around Bell Road, if you've been here in the last 10, 12 years, the flood that happened back in 2010, we can't widen that area because it is in a flood zone. So a lot of that area there is aerial. There's choice lanes on it.
Is it essentially be like a delineator between like the south of that is going to be more at grade, and then as you get closer to town from Bell Road up, it's going to be elevated. Okay.
Right now, conceptually.
Yeah, I understand. It's still a lot.
Like I said.
No, I understand that completely. I'm just curious to see because
Like from Sam Ridley south, we have a nice wide median in there. It makes sense to widen everything to the median. From in out where we don't have room on the inside, we're gonna have to widen to the outside. Well, where we can't widen to the outside, we're gonna go elevate.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of a lot of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's what we have. Again, that's what we are conceptual.
Yeah, understand. It's
Still
still
knows what these designers
So that's the challenge, right? Like even when we talk about right of way, I mean, even as something as simple as a communication strategy plan, I'm now talking about, okay, right of way impacts. I would hate to go to a property owner and say, current conceptual plans show you are being impacted in the right of way. However, we could see a change in the design and they could not be impacted in that, ATC or whatever that looks like. So that's the learning curve when it comes to the process and the actual like timeline.
What does that look like? Because I can't even fathom it right now. I mean, we have set standards of when you let property owners know that
So
they're.
we still follow our true procedure, the actual procedure of a letter of notice, and, then we negotiate. That will all still stay the same. It just we're gonna need to do that during this time frame where we may still need to come back to them and say, actually, plans have changed. We're now looking at it this way. We may only need 400 feet of your property or whatever that might look like. Is that correct?
It's going to evolve as the design gets finalized and approved.
And what the reason that a lot of the public meetings are so critical in this process is because, we're putting out these conceptual plans to make sure that as many people want to know can know. So in March, we're going to need as many people as possible to come out so they can see this conceptual plan, and right of way will be there. It may not be a right of way meeting, right? Because we're not to that point yet. We can't talk to those points yet, at least. But people will be able to be informed on what that looks like.
Really, from the federal perspective, it's really pushing us because TDOT's going to find a viable design that'll have operational and safety acceptance. We'll do a NEPA decision, and we're going into it knowing we're probably going to be reevaluating that decision. So it's tough.
Mind meld.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ask you about the elevated roadways. This is just my own ignorance about the right of way process. What complications, are there any complications in the right of way process for that aerial elevated compared to a traditional right of way? Like,
No.
Yes,
You're right, yeah.
yes, so there may be properties that we have limited access to. And so the approach then we go, well, in an elevated section, do we acquire air rights? Okay, well, how does that look long-term, 50 years from now? So there's got to be some O&M, what if somebody hits a bridge pyramid and there's got to be some repair? Do you do all the repair from up top with the snooper truck? Or what does maintenance look like? Are we going to have to get back on this property at all for any vegetation trimming? Those are all the questions that you kind of have to ask.
And also
50
to your
years in
point,
advance.
we have to have, he mentioned, we have to have air rights. It is kind of like a property, a right of way impact. So we still have to navigate that.
thank you.
But just to give you a concept of what it may look like for those that travel 40 West out Charlotte, where you get off to go to Briley, those ramps are elevated to the outside. That is a typical elevated. If you could just put your choice lanes hat on and say, okay, those are choice lanes. That's what it'll look like. They may be a little closer to the road than those are, but essentially that's what I'm talking about.
What are the impacts, I guess, to also like noise levels for the elevated versus not grade? Like,
We're studying.
But it's part of the NEPA process. There is a noise study that has to be involved and presented and planned. There will be noise walls on this project at certain locations.
I was curious how
those are getting evaluated.
I was curious how noise mitigation or, congestion noise mitigation would work on those elevated compared to. Thank you.
Yeah. That's great. That's why we're here. We want to have this conversation. So anything else? Okay. We'll keep tracking. Okay, this is just a look at the responsibilities divvied up between us and them. So, we are the contracting entity. We are the project sponsor and manager. We have our roadway O&M of general purpose lanes. That is kind of an asterisk, a note. We have, it's like John mentioned, one of those flags in the ground pretty early on. Right now, we're currently thinking that we will be the ones to maintain the general purpose lanes while the private entity maintains choice lanes. Something that we want to stay committed to taxpayers of, we can guarantee that our level of service will not falter. We will make sure that you won't see, high priced, wonderful, smooth roads in the choice lanes. We will make sure that we are continuing to serve you just as well as they are. We will, as I mentioned, we will implement the tolling authority through that commercial back office, customer service operations, and then the violation and processing and enforcement. The developer will be the financing arm piece of all of this. They will design and construct. They will have the O&M of the choice lanes, user fee roadside systems, and in part, that user fee back office. And that is literally just making sure that their roadside systems can communicate with that back office system and that user fee interaction so that we can get something as simple as that image that tells us which driver needs to be billed, just that communication and interaction. The O&M responsibility, these are just some additional points of, what it looks like for them versus us, but the developer will be responsible for all lanes during construction. They will also include those bullet points here. And we will be responsible for maintaining those general purpose lanes after the fact.
And that's kind of typical for those that don't know, the TDOT project goes under contract. The contractor now is responsible for all those traffic monitoring, not so much incident response. But,
yeah.
Errors, potholes.
Not new. Yeah. Okay, so this is a look at that back office divvy up responsibility kind of thing. So we've got a couple slides here, but we will implement the regulatory user fee policy and the oversight there. We want to make sure that we have the oversight where we need it. I know, I'm sure you've heard it, but the story that we always say is when Granny accidentally gets in the choice lane and doesn't understand that she needed to pay or that she would get a bill. And she thought, oh, I had the best trip to my doctor's appointment today. You wouldn't believe traffic was great. And it's like, oh, we want to make sure that she doesn't have a terrible user interface when she gets that bill. Like she has a person that she can call. A live person will talk to her. We want to make sure that we have someone or an actual physical location that she can go to. So part of the reason we're doing this. And then
Is that a separate procurement right there? You've got to get a separate contractor to take care of all that for you.
Correct. Yeah. So with that, I mean, it's a competitive procurement that we'll go through. It's a vendor for there are specific vendors and companies who do this all over the country. We'll oversee that contract and then managing the customer interactions. The vendor and commercial back office then will take care of those bullet points there. So revenue management, financial reconciliation, customer support, processing those violations, integrating the system. So these are simply just images to show you how they all have to work in concert with one another. We will be constantly talking with this back office so that they can effectively collect that revenue and then deliver on the project as a whole. Any questions there? I know that those are very high level points, but user fees and the processing of them can often be a hot topic. Rightfully so. We get it. In that topic, our Transportation Modernization Board has approved what's called a habitual violator policy. This is not, we're not going to be taking people to court. So that does happen in other states. And in other states, the developer, if you have someone who is consistently abusing the system, not paying bills, always driving in the choice lanes while you're like, I follow the rules and they get to use it just like I do. So in other states, the developer is responsible for that back office, like we talked about, and they'll actually like track people down and take them to small claims court, the whole thing. With us overseeing that process and, you know, that system, we get to also decide how we track down violators that are consistently abusing the system. So it's a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing. 3 unpaid events on 3 separate dates within a year. So we've set that, okay, you have to meet this bar. And then on top of that, we said, oh, and it can't be, these fees can't be for $7, $15, $50. They have to at least total $100. So we really did structure this policy in a way that we're trying to target those who are just taking advantage, rather than someone like me who, you know, was busy with my toddler and completely forgot to pay the bill. That's not what we want. We don't want to punish those who just forget every now and then.
Just for clarification, for that, the second bullet point says has a minimum of total $100. Does that mean, could they have like 7 violations, but if they paid their bills off and like, if they're under the $100, they would not be?
Correct.
Okay, so it's basically, it's a kind of a rolling kind of, not like a total, just a rolling. What they
Yeah,
have
and
there.
think about it this way too, you know, the way the systems normally work is on a monthly billable cycle. So you could, you know, in theory, pay your bill that month. You still maybe have some late fees, but if it doesn't meet that $100 total, or, you know, if they're not all within that 12-month period, that, you know, that's where
That's what I
that
assumed.
threshold.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the mechanism that would then enact is that there could be a suspension or non-renewal on that person's registration if they don't pay. This is just the administration and invoice process. This is a lot of in the weeds info, but basically, you know, the whole system operates on a transponder in your vehicle that registers, you know, oh, okay, it's Rebecca Hammonds and this is her car. And okay, well, we know to take the money out of her actual account or set up with this account in the app, whatever it may be. There will be a lot of people who don't have transponders, and we will do LPRs, bill by mail. This is just the process of here's how those bills will be sent out, and then here's how they will be collected. So we put forth that process, very straightforward, and it was also approved by the Transportation Modernization Board.
I'm ignorant on this. How do you get the transponder? How do you get one?
So we will have a full rollout of, you can buy them at your, you know, whatever, DMV. We want to put them in Kroger. We want to, you know, we'll have them at libraries. We'll have them, I mean, it's honestly, so the DOT will have a full campaign to roll them out and get them everywhere. But also the developer will be doing something similar. So they're going to put them places that you can buy them, where they know that you're going to be often. They will benefit from as many people having transponders as possible as well. So
Hear it all over, well, the radio, whatever you're listening to, television commercials.
yeah,
It'd be pretty obvious.
and they're cheap. You're not spending like $15 to buy one. Yes, ma'am.
I was recently in North Carolina and I see that you can use the varying states around North Carolina's, like Georgia Pass, the Peach Pass in North Carolina. Is that something Tennessee will do?
Yeah, we haven't landed on the exact like authority or whatever the term is called, but
Interoperability
Thank you.
is a working assumption, but yes,
Yeah.
interoperable with other states.
Actually, a federal mandate that by year 20 something, all of them have to be, but as the United States has not got there yet, but yes, there will be.
right.
And the transponder will be, for those that go to car washes and get the little sticker that goes in your windshield when you pull up to the gate. That's the C6 transponder. That's what it'll be. It won't be these big old white boxes you should see at the
Anything else? So this is looking at the user fee policy. I mean, this is the nitty gritty, but it's just showing that like all passenger vehicles, you know, are eligible to use the user fees. Talks about occupancy, that the existing HOV lanes will remain as is. That's actually something the TMA laid out specifically, that the HOV lanes cannot be converted into user fee facilities. So part of the funding / financing of this project is to include TIFIA loans, which is through the Build America Bureau. So just to say that we have been in conversations with the Build America Bureau about what this could look like and what this would mean for us. We will make, you know what, this, I'm gonna toss it over to Thomas. This is where my knowledge stops. So can you help me explain the TIFIA process?
So it's an application process. It's competitive across projects around the country. It is a low interest rate, federally backed loan program available for the development of transportation infrastructure. So there is, again, a process to apply for that. The developer, along with TDOT, will apply for such a loan, and it's anticipated that that will be part of the overall funding package that makes up kind of how this project gets off the ground.
It will not be in the state of Tennessee's name because we do not bond. We're just simply helping get the application started for the concessionaire.
So I know that we are at noon. I think that we are out of time. This is our last slide. It's not true. I have several more, but we're going to end it here. This is the timeline that we referenced. You can see those milestones here with RFP and then commercial close that you guys are asking about. We will make ourselves available for questions. I just want to turn it back over to you guys, though, in case people need to go, or if you had any other items on the agenda. Okay.
No, y'all are it. Y'all are it.
Okay. I'll pause there, though. I know we went over a lot. Are there any other questions? The other slides that I had were more of our communications outreach and NEPA effort and where we are in the NEPA process. Oh, sorry. It's okay. It's okay. I don't need to hear two of me. I hear enough of myself these days, Skipper.
That's just proving that I was listening.
So what can we answer that we maybe did not today?
Why break the project into?
Say it again.
Why break the project into?
I think in short, industry appetite. We want to make sure that it's the right size project. Yeah, was that how you would answer that?
Yeah, these are driven by, the state does their own due diligence around, what makes sense in terms of where to look at choice lanes as a potential project, and also size and structure. But the other key input is really what the market is telling us, because they're going to be a key partner, obviously, along the journey. And so we take that feedback. The state doesn't always adopt everything that we're hearing, but
that was one of the things.
But there are inputs that are of value because they're doing their own due diligence, their own analysis. And if we're open-minded to what we're hearing, it could potentially result in better value for the state.
I was listening, and I want to pick up on something that Felix was mentioning about additional elements beyond your narrow scope of work for the purpose and need. This is still a really important corridor to our region, to the communities it serves. And we just want to find the best way possible to get the best design out of this facility, even if it doesn't meet TDOT specific objectives, even if it means us bringing the additional money to the table. And I don't mean this as a criticism, it's just the way it is, but sometimes the process feels slippery in terms of how we engage in it. I know you're wanting our feedback, but a lot of times we provide feedback and it's like, well, that's not quite the time to figure that out. And so we just want to make sure we're properly negotiating with you what we get out of this investment, even if it's not, even if it's beyond the scope of the TMA. It's not likely we're going to stack a ton of different options in this corridor. This is going to define what this facility looks like. And so I don't know if that's rhetorical, but that's why we want to stay engaged with you. And also just, we're going to probably keep asking, well, like what kind of feedback when before this gets too late.
Okay.
Just something I wanted to express there.
Noted. I appreciate it. I don't think this is a really, slippery is actually a really good way to describe it, I think, because even we are learning the process of the P3 model and when to bring stakeholders in. Because, in a usual process, I mean, you heard me say even to Mayor Reed, like bringing something before our environmental studies were even done to these mayors would have been a tad premature. So we have to get to a place where we can even have a recommended preferred alternative to bring to you all and to them. And then having that conversation, knowing that it will likely change based on the type of deal or the type of feedback we get from industry. So we are learning that too.
Well, and so that does require, even if it's not TDOT being the one setting the requirement, that we set requirements that have to be met. And we just want to be part of setting those requirements, even if it increases our responsibility to help them get met.
Okay.
For transit. I mean, we're having to amend the plan, our regional plan now, because the way we were going to deal with long-term traffic congestion in a sustainable way in our region was to incorporate rapid transit, which is what regions of our size begin to do. And I don't not believe the performance measures that you're seeing in other choice lanes corridors across the country, but we're trying to get away from telling people we're going to reduce congestion on the roadways. It's about giving people options to not be held hostage by the congestion and increasing throughput for the same level of congestion. So again, it's just really important that we don't miss our opportunity to get the right design and implementation. Because we're not likely to go in and build a parallel rapid transit line if we spend $4 billion on choice lanes.
And honestly, I think that's what I hope that discussion with those mayors can in part be, because we will have some of that actual like recommended preferred alternative that we'll be showing them, something that we're not showing at a larger meeting like this. So I think those conversations can be prudent at that time. Would you add anything there that
No, I wouldn't. No, I think that was good.
Okay.
And you mentioned the EA document going to Federal Highway in January, and that
Draft EA, end of this year.
I know we don't always formally respond in a concurrence point, but to understand what we might be able to see the assumptions and the analysis that went into the determination of whatever is included in that document, even if it's as it's going to Federal Highway.
So our draft EA, we're looking at the end of December with a draft interstate access report in March and public hearings in March. We are expecting, the draft NEPA document and mitigation plan in February. That's what it looks like here. So I hear you, and I'll take that back. But I do hope some of that conversation is beneficial when we meet with them.
I appreciate that. And just so everybody is aware, we're also, at the request of Smyrna Mayor Reed, going to be assembling an additional meeting before the January 15th board meeting for the communities within that corridor to have conversations with each other and TDOT all at the same time, since they're going to be most directly impacted not only by the improvement, but the process for the improvement that is affecting other decisions that need to be made, transportation, land use, economic development in the corridor. So we'll keep everybody posted on the results of that meeting, but that's also in the hopper. And I do have a couple of non-related reminders, announcements to make, but I throw it back to you to see if there are any other questions about the choice lanes and P3 authority.
You guys got any questions?
Any other projects that you studied? I know it's been stated in the past that you can't keep freight lines from using the choice lanes. At least that's what I understood. But is there a projected percentage of use for these by freight lines?
So when you say you can't keep, and you're talking about trucks, I'm assuming?
Right.
And when you say you can't keep them from, like, they're not prohibited, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know other percentages in other states, you might, but I can say that for 24, large, heavy truck infrastructure traffic makes up about 13 to 15% of the traffic on 24, which is significant. So while we are still making decisions about truck involvement on choice lanes, we do expect them to just, they're gonna be using it. Like you said, it's not like we can, we're not gonna say trucks aren't allowed, but what that looks like as far as pricing and all of that, I think still to be studied.
So if they're not permitted by policy,
Right.
they would receive a violation. No, but if they are permitted by policy, they would just be charged the user fee.
I hope that clarified.
Yeah,
He said that a lot better than
I didn't quite hear everything he said, but that's fine.
Yeah, so I guess if they're permitted to use the facility by policy, which is still to be determined, they would be charged a user fee at whatever level. But if they're not permitted, then they would be in violation and then, they'd be processed as a violating vehicle.
So let me clarify. There are lanes, express lanes in other states that in policy do not allow the trucks to use them.
Okay.
Now, whether or not they use them, it happens. And law enforcement likely is not stopping them. It is, like he mentioned, a violation of like they would be billed and feed accordingly.
Okay.
Does that clarify?
Yeah, well, it clears up my initial question, which was, I thought it had been discussed previously that trucks could not be prohibited from using the lanes, but if you're saying that as a matter of policy, you may establish that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that discussion's happening. We're talking about all of the impacts that might incur because of it, right? Traffic, environmental studies, all of the trickle down effect of what that looks like. As of right now, we're moving forward in procurement saying that they are not they're not permitted to use them.
Good, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else?
Then, Mr. Chair, before we break, wanted to make sure that you are all aware of the invitation that you have to join us Monday from 4 to 6 at Johnny Cash Barbecue, which is right next to the museum. This is our annual partners reception and regional award ceremony, 4 to 6, gnrc.org/RSVP for details and to register. So hope to see you all there, folks online as well. And then I want to give you another URL if you're interested in writing it down and getting a sneak peek at the forecast results. That's at gnrc.org/maps/2050 growth. We'll put that in email, but I know some of you love to get online and play with GIS in your spare time. So that's the URL to the forecast that we're going to be looking for you to provide input on. Daniel, anything else we want to share, stats perspective, before we turn it back over to Chair for wrapping up?
Nothing from me on day 3 so far, but you guys good.
Good stuff.
Anybody have anything else? Any questions? No? Announcements? All right, well, thank y'all very much. We're adjourned.
Felt really productive. Good.
I can access. What was the last part of that? 2050 growth. Growth, 2050 growth.
So you just sent me some data.
I'll send you maybe like 5 or 6.
Be great.
Hopefully you clear like 3. Then we get
Awesome, but we'll keep hearing it happen.
Thank you, Andrew. Real good. You guys done. Congratulations.
Reach out anytime.
That's good.
That was a blur. Here's my card, actually.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Done
Hazel. Let's go. Same question. Done Hazel Daniel?
I made that, I was with the planning team, they had another person. They had a map.
I take it as, I think it.
Long-term differential like GDOT.
There was like 50 something of them. And I'm like, this is actually, I got 41.
Okay, yeah.
I got 30, yeah, I got 30. There's no rivers. That's what I'm thinking. There were no rivers. I want to see them. geographic bodies. Yeah.
And then it's like we showing us we already designed it. So So I guess what we're trying to anticipate is make sure it's not.
They've got it, they're very, my other government, my trades, is like a night and day difference. Oh, it's massive.
You know, we're busy, you know, fun, having time for like, by design is, we can present though, it's like. You know,
Not even like software.
Platform, I'm familiar with that. Okay. Okay, got it.
Probably follow up with some basic.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah.
I know they got 2 or 3 different breeds to take a present.
I like, what do you think? I was like, go out, do something.
Cool.
So.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yep. Yep.
The inductions, they can think of the due date.
Like some insight.
In case you're. Yeah.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah. I prefer more Christmas too, because as long as I don't pay double deductible, like, it's like you're out. So it's like, yeah, but, yeah, so I imagine,
Yes.
at least.
Positive active transportation, which, you guys are not, we got
Same, so I think it looks like,
Sorry, I misunderstood.
turmoil, so we haven't been
Yeah.
this year yet, but
I'm,
yeah, awesome. Yeah, yeah.
No,
Oh, yeah. Personally, for you.
never I hear.
Oh, nice.
Like, that's,
how do you feel like your birthday?
Later.
Let's get to you, dude, are you like, I have a friend whose birthday is the 20th, my best friend. That whole time growing up, he's like, I don't like birthdays, I just don't, not for me. Yeah, it's just like, I'm like this way, but they still, so it's like, well, they don't like celebrating myself. I was like, so still because she couldn't. I was like, I feel bad. It's like, I don't like, we've got to see. I know.
I'm used to like, I think
It was Tina Turner. That's why we have.
You're spending. Someone was joking, you need to do like a half birthday, and I was like, yeah, mine's only in June. So like, I'll be like, yeah, it's.
I almost wish that that was the tradition they started, and I never would have thought twice about it. But even then, like.
Yeah, no, we've had great meetings. We had.
Tennessee is weird that our school ends like 3rd week in May, so you usually have people doing their vacations. And then like by the time June hits, they're kind of back. And
June. Answering every. Yeah, Brad.
Exactly.
On June 4th, so it was like 2 weeks after school ended. Just I had a pool party, I think, every year from age like 7 till like 14.
Congratulations.
Thanks, yeah.
New dig.
And, yeah, sorry for the late text back. It's not worth the week, yeah.
I just figured like, oh, it's the holidays, but I figured I was gonna run into you.
Yeah.
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 Thanks.
How's it going, man? Good to see you.
Say hey.
You going good?
Seeing you. See you guys around.
Not have to be.
My brother's English troubles.
Hey, Jason. Good, how are you, sir?
Good question.
Yes.
Tricky.
I do look.
Yeah. That's right. You had to.
Maybe from you next year. Congratulations.
You were in the Seattle area, right? So I'm sure they have
You know, you
Build
build it,
facility.
and they pay
Yeah.
years, so like,
Right.
when you have the interstate,
Like,
that's where we, like, instead of fighting the traffic. Like the first thing.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's no- And if the concern is that, hey, we don't want to build over isolation. That's just, but we're exactly in the process.
If that's the next, I think, but it's not, that's, what I was trying to say.
As much
as they want to go.
as much as travel reliability.
Yeah.
So is having the.
They were like really hard to coordinate.
Doing the math though about what.
It's not. It's like, kind of like the church.
Doing
So it's not a specific choice.
Get people that can carpool, and because, they can
Visualize it. So
just, so take your time.
But because.
Theoretically, yeah, I mean, because I'm like.
Right, so.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always glad to listen.
Yeah.
I know the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I knew you could relate to that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, good to meet you.
You too.
Yeah.
Take care, Jason.
We've gotten a lot of like.
I'm Jason.
Do you know how much?
I'm in CDM.
How much we're working on?
Actually, may work for, very sorry. Seen your name on Kate's grant, and then just heard, and I was just like, have you met Marty? I'm like, no, I haven't met Marty, and so I just wanted to introduce myself. I was at SDOT, the Seattle. So, yeah, I was there for like 7 years.
Like if we're already doing a study in and around the area where there's a plan about forest.
How long have you been at National DOT?
I just want to capitalize.
Okay. Yeah, nice.
Okay. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
There's somewhere.
I saw the back of it. Kind of alternative.
Are you from the area?
Then you should be here. No, Mississippi.
Okay.
Be for a little longer. Just our potential.
Yeah, yeah, I got here as quick as you could. Very cool. Well, I just want to introduce myself, and sure I'll be seeing you around some more.
Now that I recognized your face and I knew that like that's
That's why.
Yeah,
That's why I think it's.
yeah, it's an animated face, like a Sesame Street character or something.
I want to be on the like whatever.
Yep.
Always.
Sure. Well, we're it's interesting. Now we got Scott, he moved to the NDOT side. I think it's gonna be real, and we've gotten into a nice groove, I think, where we really move through it and talk about a lot. And so it's kind of cool to see where we're at.
You have to get off and go through the council and with Pam.
Yeah.
Get on the edge.
It was things we struggle. It's always a challenge everywhere I've worked. Intent of the project all the way through.
I mean, 66, thank you.
Yeah, but that's.
It's a short piece between. Yeah.
It's just like.
Yeah.
There's a function of it, but yeah.
Those conversations happen, Mr.
That is more, I've worked in Texas before, so yeah. Public here, it's doing November's in New England, and Seattle, the planner. It's given a lot higher ownership. The engineers also, that's kind of what I got to do a lot of. We had almost like a mixing pot of developers. And then we had a rule, I don't know if you all had it, but like that owner.
Well, I blocked that process.
Yeah. Well, this one I feel learning better. Yeah, so.
With. Certainly, right, you study for.
Better.
It's part of it also.
Cool. Great meeting you, Marty. See you. How you doing? How's things doing well? Doing well. Still looking. Need somebody. I know everything there is to know, but it's tough to find people. It's tough to.
I told Sean that I had.
So put them on the payroll. So let me know if anything comes to mind.
Appreciate it. My morning. There's still.
They instructed us.
So flatters, it's like a bunch of flatters. No, it's just.
I've been trying to fight that.
Yeah.
See? It's just forget.
It just.
I don't understand. This whole. Those people have these origin workshops and things like that because they never really.
Like, where does that go?
About it.
Up there.
I said. Yeah, especially this one. I heard today talking about how. It's been a learning.
It's hard. It's fine. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things happening, but. They're smart. Give them credit. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just here to.
As a whole. Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't here at some job better and improvement.
We appreciate for
I took my daughter back up to Deanna and just kept going. So I stayed with my mom for 2 days.
I don't want to go.
Where she was in.
Oh. I can do that, yeah.
She saw your football team. Yeah, she never bought tickets though.
Don't stay in the car without me.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
Shopping in the car.
Yeah.
And then see my reaction. I'm like, it's a good thing I wasn't here, cause
She's waiting.
I was back there, back where nobody could see me.
First choice.
Cause I was like, I'm like. Where are you? Good for her.
Except the thing. Is not giving them any kind of shit. I do really want.
I've been this often.
I don't know if we could take that. A lot easier.
We gotta go out to the lobby so I can close up
Oh,
the area.
gosh, Lou.
I know, I'm being a real meanie. You can go out to the lobby and talk all you want to. I just need to close up the area. Kids stay here. Guys, I'm hungry and it's lunchtime. Hey, you have a Merry Christmas. Hello.